A very warm welcome to this reflection in the first week of May. A special evensong had been planned in the cathedral this week to mark the 75th anniversary of VE Day, Victory in Europe, on May the 8th. That, of course, is not now happening. Instead, there will be a briefer online service at 10 o'clock on May the 8th, in which we will give thanks both for the cessation of hostilities and also for the relative peace Europe has enjoyed over the last 75 years. In a recent speech, the Prime Minister suggested that the present COVID crisis is the greatest challenge we have faced since the end of the Second World War. And in that speech, he incorporated the language of war. He talked about the crisis being a conflict. He talked about winning the fight. The Queen, too, in her speech, drew parallels between the Second World War and our present crisis, comparing social isolation and distancing to the experience of evacuees who were separated from their families during the war. And while I think the parallels with the war can be overstated, it did make me reflect that maybe we should turn to the deep spiritual writing that emerged from the war years to give us help and strength in these difficult times. In March 1941, a Dutch Jew called Etty Hillesum, living in Nazi-occupied Amsterdam, wrote the first entry in her diary. This diary, together with her letters, came to be among the greatest spiritual writings to emerge out of the war. They were later published under the title An Interrupted Life. So what in our interrupted lives might we learn from the writings of Etty Hillesum? In June 1943, Etty Hillesum was taken to Westerbork transit camp before being transported to Auschwitz, where she died in November 1943. The psychotherapist Viktor Frankl, himself a survivor of Auschwitz, has said that in extremes, when everything is stripped away, people only survive if they have discovered meaning and purpose. Etty Hillesum found meaning and purpose by paying deep attention, in the first place, to God. While still in Amsterdam, she began the practice of giving silent attention to God within her, an inward listening and gazing in contemplative prayer. This became a habitual practice which sustained her through all the sufferings of 1943. But the giving of silent attention to God also gave her a certain spiritual detachment, which didn't try to conquer or escape the suffering around her, but enabled her to embrace it, to transform it, and find meaning and purpose. That's the power of contemplative prayer. Another way Etty's life was given meaning was by paying attention to God's world. In her diaries, she writes how one day in Westerbork camp, she and a friend spent a quarter of an hour gazing at gulls among deep blue rain clouds. As a result, she records how they both felt less oppressed. Being in touch with God's handiwork lessened the pressure. On another occasion, there was a rainbow over the camp, a sight she so cherished that she was filled with a joy that was obvious to her fellow prisoners. Yet even more important than this was the attention she gave to the people around her, whether it was crying babies and distraught mothers, or desperately frail 80-year-olds quite unable to cope with the pressures of the camp. One witness said that where people were doomed to death, she affirmed life through the warmth of her love and care for others. She also made time to write letters to friends in what must have been very difficult and fraught circumstances. Making time then, giving attention to others in situations of stress and interrupted lives, takes us out of ourselves and gives purpose and meaning where there seems to be none. Etty Hillison did not write her diaries for her own satisfaction or comfort. Rather, she said that she wanted, in a time of unparalleled suffering, to be a witness that God lives, and that by resting in him, suffering can be transformed by his abundant life, a very Christ-like thought. Perhaps through her words and example, we can share in that abundant life in our own day.